My life fades, the vision dims, and all that remains are memories. The Wardens had just walked into the aftermath of a battle. The fighting was ending. Smoke drifted over the broken rooftops of the town. The ground was littered with defeated hobgoblins, and the terrible wyvern that had been terrorizing the town had just been brought down. The Wardens stepped cautiously into the village streets, taking in the damage. Doors were broken, wagons overturned. The smell of battle still hung heavy in the air, but the people were alive, and that meant the fight had been worth it. The 102nd Company, those red-haired, bearded lunatics who fight like drunken barbarians at a tavern brawl, were already cheering and celebrating their victory. Axes raised, ale mugs appearing out of nowhere. You know, the usual. But the Wardens weren't celebrating just yet, because one question hung heavy over the battlefield. Where's Leroy? So the Wardens searched. They kicked through debris, they checked the fallen, they scanned the streets and alleys, but Leroy the Goblin was nowhere to be found. Whether he had slipped away, crawled off somewhere, or simply vanished into the wilds, nobody could say. And that, friends, is the sort of mystery that has a way of showing back up later. Now, while the 102nd continued their celebration, the Wardens began to settle in after the long battle. Some rested, some kept watch, and some simply ran out of energy, because the long fight had taken its toll. Soon enough, Mr. Pfister, Elsid, and the ranger with no name were all exhausted. So the three of them found a quiet place to collapse and try to get a little sleep. Meanwhile, Zoftig the pirate had very different priorities. Because Zoftig had found himself a table, a bowl, and a handful of ingredients. And before long he was happily making salsa in the middle of a half-destroyed village like it was the most natural thing in the world. Priorities. You understand. Now, while Zoftig was busy perfecting his recipe, Talon wandered away from the celebration. He walked through the quiet streets, thinking about everything that had happened. And that's when something strange occurred. For just a moment, the world faded. The sounds of the village disappeared. And Talon found himself standing once again in a familiar place. The mist, the quiet, the strange, dreamlike realm connected to his shield. And from within that pale fog stepped a figure he had seen before. The Lady of the Shield. She approached him calmly. She spoke of courage, of sacrifice, of the strength Talon had shown in defending the innocent. She told him that the shield had awakened another hidden power within him, another gift, waiting for the moment it would be needed most. Then, just as suddenly as the vision had come, it faded. The mist vanished. The noise of the village returned. And Talon was back in the real world, just in time to hear the thunderous voices of the 102nd Company shouting and chanting the Wardens' names in celebration. But peace in these lands never lasts long. Because as Talon continued walking through the damaged village, a young boy approached him. The boy looked frightened, confused, lost. And he asked a simple question. "Have you seen my father?" The boy explained that a few days earlier, he and his father had been down by the river when they saw something strange flying overhead. At first they thought it was a dragon, but the closer they looked, the more wrong it seemed. Its wings were covered in eyes, and where its head should have been was one enormous staring eye. Talon's expression darkened immediately, because he knew exactly what the creature was. An eye drake, a twisted servant of the Red Hand. And worse still, the eye drake served Azar Kul, the warlord leading the Red Hand invasion, which meant something very troubling indeed. Whatever the eye drake sees, Azar Kul sees too. The Wardens had been spotted, and the Red Hand now knew exactly where they were. Now, just as Talon was putting this together, the sky suddenly darkened. A massive shadow passed over the village. At first glance, it looked like the end of the world itself. A creature with many heads, wings that blocked the sun, and a shape that reminded everyone of something far too terrible to even say aloud. The Wardens scrambled awake. Mr. Pfister jumped to the window. The ranger with no name grabbed his weapons. Elsid slowly rose, green amulet faintly glowing. And outside, Talon stood alone in the middle of the road as the townsfolk ran screaming past him. But Talon realized something important. This wasn't Tiamat, not even close. What they were facing was a Dracohydra, and Talon had an idea. With a snap of his fingers and a burst of magic, he banished the monster into a pocket dimension for exactly 1 minute. 1 minute for the Wardens to prepare, 1 minute to plan, 1 minute to get ready for the fight. And when the creature returned, Elcid stepped forward. His green amulet glowed bright. He spoke a command, and the Dracohydra suddenly froze mid-flight. The monster locked solid and crashed into the ground with a thunderous impact, sliding across the rubble until it stopped just feet away from Talon. What followed was less a battle and more a very enthusiastic monster beating. The Wardens attacked. The 102nd Company charged in, roaring like maniacs. Axes swung, spells flew, and the Dracohydra did not last long. But victory brought with it a difficult truth. They could not stay. As long as the Eye Drake watched from the skies, the Red Hand would keep sending monsters. The town would never be safe. So their elven guide Eric stepped forward. He would lead the townsfolk and the 102nd Company back toward Brindle. Meanwhile, the Wardens would leave immediately, riding the giant owls they had been given, drawing the enemy's attention away. And so, once again, the Wardens took to the skies. But exhaustion soon caught up with them. While flying through the clouds, Mr. Pfister and Elcid tried to catch a quick nap on their owls. Elcid managed just fine. Mr. Pfister did not, because before long he rolled right on back of his owl and began plummeting toward the forest below. Only Zoftig the pirate noticed. He dove after him in an attempt to catch him, but Mr. Pfister fell like a rock. He smashed through branches, bounced off leaves, and landed on the forest floor with a thud that probably woke half the woodland creatures for miles. Meanwhile, the rest of the Wardens continued flying, unaware their companions had gone missing. When they finally noticed, they circled back, searching the sky and the forest below. But instead they saw something else. A patchwork hot air balloon under attack. 3 wyverns circled it with hobgoblin riders, and leaning over the side of the basket was a gnome named Tink, who immediately fired his blunderbuss straight into the sky. What followed looked less like a fantasy battle and more like an airborne dogfight. Wyverns diving, arrows flying, Mr. Pfister and Zoftig joining the fight from below, and after a chaotic, ridiculous and very loud battle, the hobgoblins were defeated. With the danger over, the Wardens regrouped with Tink. Inside the balloon's basket, Tink unrolled a map, and on that map was something incredible, a castle floating on a cloud. Somewhere near it lurked the Eye Drake. So the Wardens made a plan: distract the Eye Drake, climb the nearby peak, capture the creature, then infiltrate the floating castle with Tink's help. And that, my friends, is where our heroes now find themselves, rising into the sky, owls soaring beside them, the balloon drifting toward the clouds, and somewhere out there, a storm giant's castle waits. But that is a story for next time. And who knows? Maybe we'll even discover what happened to that slippery little troublemaker who vanished after the battle. The return of Leroy the Goblin? Maybe. Just maybe.